Hello my lords, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Nick Saraf's Food Log. 'Tis the season to be jolly, and we're making today a Christmas special meatloaf served with a side of mashed potatoes. So let's start with the Christmas meatloaf. So the first thing we do is put a pan on medium to high heat and pour in a good amount of oil. To this we add a good amount of minced garlic and a good amount of chopped onion, and we cook this through. When the garlic is browned and the onion has cooked too, we take it off the heat and add it to 2 kilos of chicken mince. And now we give this a good mix. And now we make an indent in the center and add some sour cream, a lightly beaten egg, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, a tablespoon of mustard. So the spice mix contains paprika, cayenne pepper, crushed black pepper, ginger powder and some cinnamon. Then we add some mixed dried herbs and lastly some salt. And now we give it a good mix. And now for 2 kilos of chicken, we add about 500 grams, or a little bit more, of breadcrumbs. There we go. And give it a good mix. So now we divide this mixture into half. Take half of it and keep it aside. To half of it, we add some pureed tomato. And now we add a glass bowl to the chicken. To the other half, we add some amount of milk. Now the idea is to get the meat not too moist, but not too firm either, somewhere in the middle ground. We give this a good mix. On a silpat mat, we get the half of the meat that was mixed with the milk, rub some oil on my hands, and flatten it out. So if after doing this, you don't feel like making a meatloaf, but making burger patties instead, you can. And then call an elephant home for dinner, because size, it's just big enough for an elephant. On the spread out meat, we add the remaining meat. Oil my hands slightly and spread it out. And now we roll this up to form a roulade. And now we divide this into half. In a buttered pan, a bread pan mostly, we put half of it in, and then the other half. And now we put this on an oven tray, and into the oven it goes at 180 degrees for about an hour. There we go. Now that I have an hour to wait, I'm going to make some nice mashed potatoes. And these are done. As as the meatloaf is getting done, we need to prepare a glaze so that we can glaze our meatloaf and put it back in the oven. And some malt vinegar. We put this in a 3:1 ratio. There we go. A tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, a tablespoon of mustard, and a tablespoon and a half of honey. And now we just mix all of this together. And to this we add a little bit of oil. Now that an hour has passed, now meatloaf is more or less done. It's time to glaze it and put it back in the oven. So we have our prepared glaze here. Don't be afraid of the glaze dripping off. It's more important to get the glaze completely on the meatloaf. And now we put this back in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes or more if you like a really well done meatloaf. Holy mother of Christmas. Holy Christmas. And now we'll let this cool for about 10 to 15 minutes before we demold it. So now that the meatloaf is completely cooled down, it's been demolded, and it's time to cut it into slices. So let's begin. So there you have it, a relatively easy lazy man's Christmas meal. A meatloaf with a side of mashed potatoes and some easy quick chicken gravy. For the recipe of the gravy, click on the link in the description below. This is best enjoyed with a chilled or warm glass of mulled wine, but that's another story. Till then, Merry Christmas! Hello my lords, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Nick Saraf's Food Log. So here's another story. We're doing today a Christmas special once again, and that is mulled wine. For making mulled wine, we need a bottle of red wine. I'm going to put this red wine in a saucepan and keep it over medium to low heat. To this, I will add brown sugar to my taste. And now I'm going to add some sliced tangerine. Now to this, I'm going to add cinnamon sticks, some powdered nutmeg, 3 cloves, and 2 bay leaves. With a whisk, slightly whisk it just to let everything submerge in the wine and let the brown sugar and nutmeg mix a bit, so not overtly whisking. And now we leave it aside and let it come to a gradual boil. So I'm going to take the tangerine slices out of the wine and reserve them, because you know, why waste good fruit? So mulled wine is a very popular beverage across Europe and America and Australia. And in cold countries, they have it warm, so it heats them up in the winters. And in hot countries like Australia, where they have summer during Christmas, they have chilled mulled wine. So you can have it either way depending on what you like. And of course you can add some more spices to it like cardamom and so on, if you wish. And it's a beverage you can enjoy with a meal or just as a refreshment. But it's best consumed within 2 days of making it. Now that the wine has come to a boil, let's take it off the heat and strain it into a glass container. And now that the wine is slightly cooled down, let's pour it in our glasses. For that, putting half a veg of tangerine in and pouring the wine over that. So cuddle up with a loved one and a glass of chilled or warm mulled wine. Have a Merry Christmas. Cheers!
Hi guys, welcome to my recipe book with me, Tarika. So a Christmas dinner for me is just incomplete without a good roast chicken. And the recipe that I'm going to share with you today is a recipe that my mom and I work on every year, and it's super reliable. There's a special ingredient that we use to make this roast chicken, and that's this gondoraj, a lime that we get all the way from Calcutta. And we make it in a vintage rotisserie, one that is about 20 years older than me, so that's seriously vintage. Now there are a couple of components to putting this roast chicken together, but it's not something that's very complicated. Just break it down into 3 steps. I'm going to get started with the marinade first. So I've got some garlic that I've chopped up here. This is about 10 small cloves of garlic. This recipe is, very Indian in nature. It's got a lot of masala-ish flavors to it. So I'm just going to pop all of this into my tiny little mixie. So I've got about 2 inches of ginger, and now I'm going to zest up the gondoraj. This is just such a fragrant lime, right? And just adds so much flavor. I'm just going to zest it. So half of the zest I'm just going to pop into this mixer here. I'm going to put the rest of the zest into a separate bowl where I've got some chopped up celery. This is going to be the stuffing for the bird. There's not a lot of stuffing that goes into it because chicken tends to have a smaller cavity. But I just want to pack in as much flavor as I can. And speaking of flavor, once I've got the zest, I also want the juice of this gondoraj. Now I'm going on about this gondoraj, but if you can't find gondoraj, just feel free to use regular lemon or lime, whatever you have available to you. I mean, I'm crazy enough to get people traveling from Calcutta to bring this for me. I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons of sea salt, just 1 teaspoon of some ground pepper, and 1 teaspoon of chili powder. This is just to give it color, but the spice will come from the chili flakes. But I'm going to add only about half a teaspoon, not too much, because we've already got plenty of ginger and garlic in, and I don't want it to be too strong. We're nearly done. The last bit, just 2 tablespoons of olive oil. If you want to use another oil, canola, any neutral flavored oil also is fine. I just like olive oil, so that's what I tend to add. That should be good. So I'm just going to blend this marinade together in my mixie, but I have to tell you that if my mom was watching this right now, she would be very alarmed because she does this in a pestle and mortar very patiently, but patience is really not my virtue. So I'm just quickly going to blend this together. So it's a slightly chunky paste and not a runny paste, but that's exactly what I want because it'll make it easier to rub it onto the chicken. So I'm just going to put that aside for now. Okay, now for the stuffing, you've seen me use the celery and add some gondoraj zest to it. I'm just going to add a little bit of chopped up onion. This is regular red onion. I'm just going to use about half an onion only, nothing more. And season it only very slightly with salt because there's plenty that's going to be on the outside, very little, and a tiny pinch of pepper as well. Aren't you surprised I'm not using chili flakes here? Well, I've kind of learned that restraint is a good thing. Well, we'll see. So just toss this up and that's it. You don't have to do much more. Just set it aside. So the marinade is done, the stuffing is done. I'm just going to bring the bird now. It's just been resting in my kitchen. I'm just going to quickly bring it here. So here's the bird that I'm going to be working with. This chicken is skinless because that's really how most Indians tend to eat chicken, without the skin, which is kind of good in a way, which means less fat. So I'm just going to start working with this now. And guys, there's just no non-messy way of doing this. You just have to get in, get your hands dirty and do this. There's a lot of hand washing involved, I should warn you. Before I kind of massage this marinade onto the chicken, I'm just going to make some cuts, some incisions really, just to make sure that the marinade makes its way inside the chicken and we get some really good flavor. Now, a good thing to remember here when you're making these incisions is that you want to move and make these incisions along the fiber, not against it, right? So just get a feel of it. We're creating pockets of flavor. Incision here. So now I'm just going to take this marinade and stuff it into these cavities that I've created here. Use the rest to just massage it onto the chicken. It looks a little messy right now, but it's just going to taste so yum. You're not going to regret going through all of this. So I don't usually leave the chicken to marinate for some time. This marinade is quite flavor packed and strong in flavors. So I just give it a little bit of time for it to rest while the rotisserie is preheating, and then I just put it in the rotisserie. Okay, I'm going to quickly dash off to wash my hands. You need to do that when you're making this. I'm going to wash my hands before I stuff the bird. Just lift this, and into the cavity will go this stuffing. And now I'm going to wash my hands again before I truss the bird. Now, trussing is just tying up the ends and making sure that the bird doesn't flay around the rotisserie when it's cooking. And I've got some kitchen string here. So what I first do is tie the legs up. And you just want to get it really tight. There's no perfect way of trussing it. It's just something you can watch how I'm doing it, but it's something that you will learn only when you try doing this yourself. And you've guessed it, when I'm done tying this up, I will rush to wash my hands and then preheat my rotisserie. There. That is done. Okay, so I'm back with this rotisserie rod and we're just in the final stages of putting this chicken into cook. My rotisserie is preheating to 150 degrees Celsius. That's just a nice even temperature. It takes about 45 to 50 minutes to cook completely. So this is not very complicated at all. You can see here that on one end I've got this already screwed on. So I'm just going to put this through, and on the other end, just tightly screw this on. You definitely need to do this very tightly. That's it. So this is done and ready to go into my rotisserie for the next 45 to 50 minutes. I'm just going to go to my kitchen now. So I'm going to let the chicken cook at 150 degrees Celsius from anywhere between about 45 minutes to 60 minutes. Around the 40-minute mark is when I generally stick the meat thermometer deep into the chicken to check the internal temperature. And you just know it's done when it touches between 73 to 80 degrees Celsius. The chicken is really well rested, and I would advise all of you to just let it rest and cool down for some time, because even this rotisserie rod is extremely hot to handle when it comes out of the oven. Let it cool and then pull it out of the rod and cut the string. Just be sure to get all of this string off. I really like this recipe because, you know, it's a little Indian with all the masalas that I've put in, but not entirely. You'll find that it's a very simple marinade that comes together with just all the ingredients that you have lying around at home. So all the string is off. I'm going to place this lovely chicken on a bed of romaine lettuce. So guys, clearly it's not Christmas until I've worn this hat. Do you like it? I think it's quite cool. Anyways, you guys tuck into this very special family recipe of mine. I'm going to tuck into this chicken right now. Merry Christmas. Hi guys, so today I'm going to show you how to make the most awesome chocolate cake. And by the way, it's completely vegan. What? Are you trying to tell me that there are no milk, butter or eggs in this cake? That's right, there's no butter, eggs or milk in this cake. You know what? She just never believes me, but I'm going to show you how to whip up this beauty. Let's see. I'm going to start by getting this cake pan ready. I'm going to use a loose bottom cake pan, and it's really important to use this loose bottom cake pan because the cake is going to end up being really moist and tender, and to turn it out of a regular cake pan is going to be a bit of a problem. So a parchment paper lined cake pan will just work out much better. I'm greasing this pan and the parchment paper with some oil. Normally you would use butter to grease a cake pan, but this is a vegan cake, remember? So there's no butter in this. I'm using oil instead. You can use either canola or sunflower oil to grease the pan. Really, the idea is to use a neutral flavored oil so that the oil doesn't leave its own strong flavor in the cake. So this is my biggest secret when I bake a chocolate cake, is that I dust the pan with some cocoa powder instead of using regular flour. This way the cake will slide out more easily, plus you won't get any white specks on the cake. I've just got the oven preheating to 190 degrees Celsius, and here's some lukewarm water. Lukewarm, not boiling, you should just be able to stick your finger in it comfortably. And I'm adding it to half a cup of cocoa powder. I'm just going to whisk it to get the lumps out. That's all nicely mixed up. I'm just going to set it aside so that it can cool a bit and get going with the dry ingredients. So I've got 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour here, and I'm adding 1 cup of caster sugar. I'm adding 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt, and just whisk it all together. You want all the dry ingredients nicely mixed up together and evenly distributed. Now, as much as is possible, make a well in the center of the dry ingredients and pour in this cocoa mixture and half a cup of, again, a neutral flavored oil like canola or sunflower. I've got canola here though. And a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now just whisk all of this together. Again, no hand mixer or electric beater required. You can just use a regular balloon whisk and whisk all of this together till there are no lumps. There's no problem of overmixing or overbeating this batter because there are no eggs in this batter, or butter for that matter. Just beat it to get the lumps out. I reckon this works. Now for my secret ingredient in this batter, I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of plain white vinegar. This plain white vinegar is what's going to combine with the baking soda in the batter to give the cake the rise that it requires. Now I'm going to pour this batter into the prepared cake pan, and it looks just so good. I could eat it as it is. Off to bake. So the cake takes generally about 30 to 40 minutes to bake. And now I'm going to let it cool on this wire rack for about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes of letting the cake cool, just take a knife and run it along the edges of the pan, just to make sure that the cake is not sticking to the sides of the pan. Now I'm just going to open up the cake pan. Fingers crossed! I'm gently taking the bottom off to let the cake cool completely. And in the meantime, I'm going to make the chocolate glaze. So I've got 50 grams of chocolate that I've melted and cooled slightly. Just this glossy chocolate. And I'm adding 1/3 cup of sifted icing sugar. So it's starting to get a little lumpy. That's when I'm going to add some warm water. And just make sure that this is warm water, and again, not boiling water or anything. Now I'm just adding the rest of the icing sugar. Just work quickly to whisk it. If you don't follow a vegan lifestyle, you don't have to make this glaze. You could make a ganache. But even if you don't follow a vegan lifestyle, think of this as a much lighter chocolate cake to eat. Yeah, now the glaze is ready. So the cake's cooled completely, and now for the exciting part of adding the glaze. I'm going to very gently lift the parchment paper off, and because we've greased and dusted it so much, it's not stuck to the bottom of the cake at all. But you do have to do this very carefully nevertheless, because it's such a gentle little cake. This is going to be so awesome. Now I'm just going to pour all of the glaze, which has been cooled, on top of this cake. Just watch that. Oh my god. Just get all of that there. And use an offset spatula to just spread it around. And you can see that it's starting to set over the cake already. It's time to cut a nice big piece of this cake to impress someone, don't you think? It's a very moist, crumbed cake, so you just have to be a little careful that you don't break it when you pull it out. Look at that. Not bad. You're getting good at this. See? I told you. Hi everyone. Welcome to my recipe book with me, Tarika, where today I'm going to be making mashed potatoes. You know, I don't know anyone who doesn't like potatoes, and mashed potatoes in particular. But if you're someone who stayed away from eating mashed potatoes because of the oodles of butter in it, then you're going to love my recipe. I've got just 1 tablespoon of butter here that I've melted with 3 cloves of garlic that are just really finely minced. Don't let it brown, you just have to melt it and then quickly take it off the heat. I've got this pot of water heating here. I'm just going to add salt to it. And simultaneously what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to start peeling the potatoes to add them to this hot water. I'm going to boil these potatoes and then mash them up. I've got about 500 grams of potatoes, so you want to get the skin off completely. Then you just want to cut this up. And here's the trick, actually once you cut them up, these potatoes will boil much faster. So I'm just going to add these chopped up potatoes to the hot water and just continue doing this till I get all of the potatoes in. Okay, so you'll know that the potatoes are done when you can just stick a knife through it and it just goes through completely and breaks very easily. So these potatoes are done. It's time to drain them out of this starchy water. So quickly get them into this bowl. So we're moving very quickly now, and while the potatoes are still hot, just quickly mash them. So while these are mashed, I'm going to add the garlic and the butter that we had melted earlier on. Add this. This is the chopped up parsley. I'm saving some for garnish. The very classic French flavors, lots of garlic and parsley. And I've added the tablespoon of butter. If you're wondering what my cheat ingredient is going to be, it's some milk. This is what's going to give me that smooth consistency. Okay, now you want to add generous amounts of salt and pepper. So you can give it a taste right now to check the salt and pepper. It's still very hot. Could do with a bit more salt and some more pepper. Add some more milk. So I'm done mashing this and it's got a lovely silky texture that I just can't wait to plate up. But I'm gonna have to be really quick because mashed potatoes are best served hot. Garnish it with the parsley that we had set aside. So guys, these mashed potatoes have all the flavor of butter without being loaded with it. You've just got to try this recipe, also like it, share it with your friends and subscribe to our channel. See ya! Hi guys! So Christmas is around the corner and here on my recipe book with me, Tarika, I'm just going to ditch all the Christmas cakes and puddings to make really cute little cupcakes, but with an Indian twist. I'm going to stir some chikki into the frosting of these cupcakes, and the frosting is going to be made of cream cheese, which will really just make it look like snow on each one of these cupcakes. You know, now chikki is nothing but just an Indian nut brittle. I'll tell you more about it when we get to it, but I think Santa is going to be pretty impressed with what I have in store today. But first, before we start anything today on a Christmas episode, we've got to get into the Christmas spirit. Okay, so now can I start sifting the flour? I've got 125 grams of all-purpose flour, maida, and I'm just gonna add a quarter of a teaspoon of regular salt and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Now, if you're going to use salted butter in this recipe, then just skip the salt. I'm going to use unsalted butter, which is why I'm adding the salt at this stage. So I'm just going to sift this together. It's always good to sift the dry ingredients and move on to creaming the butter and the sugar together. So I've got 125 grams of caster sugar that I've weighed out already here, to which I'm going to add an equal amount of unsalted butter, and this is at room temperature. And now I'm just going to cream the butter with the sugar. Because the butter I've used was really almost of a melty consistency, I'm just going to be careful and not overbeat it at this point, otherwise my mixture will start to curdle. So I just have to keep that in mind. So now it's time to start adding the eggs. But the one thing you should always keep in mind is to add the eggs one at a time. This keeps your batter from curdling. And baking eggs are always large eggs because it's about the weight of it. Now add the second egg. And suddenly you see the batter taking on a slightly off-white color. Now it's time to get some really good quality vanilla extract. Whisk that in. A quick whisk this time, not too long. Am I the only one who's already in love with the batter? Am I? No. Am I? Okay, cool. I'm going to add the flour also in batches. That's also really important to keep it from curdling. Baking is all about patience, isn't it? You can't really rush into it. Add half of the dry ingredients only. Okay, so this batter is just perfect and just ready to be spooned into the cupcake liners now. So I just like to use this cookie scoop. I use this for measuring out cookie dough. I like using this to measure out or to scoop the batter into these cupcake liners. Just get it into these cupcake liners. This should make about 9 cupcakes. So this is what I do. I always just get it first into all the cupcake liners and then I start equaling it out. Otherwise, I always feel like I'm being partial to one cupcake liner and not the other. So I'm done playing with the cupcake batter. I've spooned it out pretty equally into these cupcake liners and my oven is preheated to 180 degrees Celsius, which just means that we're about 15 minutes away from pulling these cupcakes out of the oven. I have to rush. See ya. So you have to let these cupcakes cool completely before you can start icing them. That should take about 15 to 20 minutes, but just make sure that you cool them completely. Otherwise, when you ice them, the icing will start melting and running and it'll just be messy. You get the picture. So I'm putting them on this wire rack so that they can cool really nicely from the bottom as well. I told you I was going to tell you what chikki is. Chikki is basically a nut brittle made with jaggery. That's what sets it apart and makes it so Indian. So I'm using the peanut version, but there are so many other versions that you will find in India. You will find a sesame version or mixed nuts version. You know, whichever one that you can find easily, use that, and any flavor that you like. I like peanuts a lot, so that's what I'm going to go with. So now for the most therapeutic part of making these cupcakes, I've got this chikki in a sealed plastic bag now and I'm just going to bash it up. You want it to be broken into tiny pieces but not powdery. So just get that fine balance. Let's just get on with this very cathartic act now. So the chikki is nicely bashed up. I'm feeling a little bit better about myself, so I can move on to the frosting. So I'm just going to set it aside for now and get on with the icing. I've got 150 grams of icing sugar that I've measured out here. I'm just going to sift that. And the reason why you sift icing sugar is because you don't want lumps in your icing. It's really important to sift this. And now I'm going to move on to the cream cheese frosting. So I'm just going to measure out the cream cheese. So when you're working with cream cheese, particularly in India, you have to be careful and keep a few things in mind. A lot of recipes, when you adapt them from abroad, will tell you to use cream cheese at room temperature, but that doesn't work in the Indian environment. What I always like to do is to start with cream cheese, which is slightly cold. So I'm going to add 70 grams of cream cheese. So once the cream cheese is in, you have to add some unsalted butter. So remember when we were making the cupcakes, I told you that it's okay to use salted butter. Don't make that mistake when you're making the icing, otherwise the icing will taste salty and that's never a good thing. So make sure to use unsalted butter in this icing. This is a 70-30 ratio, so I've got 70 grams of cream cheese and I'm going to add 30 grams of unsalted butter. So now it's time to just get back to using the beater and whisk together this frosting. So that's it. Just as soon as you see that the lumps are out and you've got a smooth frosting, just stop beating this. And now you know it's time to add these pieces of chikki. I'm going to add most of it and save some of it. You'll see why. Just add it. We're not going to beat it anymore. And you know, you could taste some of the chikki at this point. I approve. And just fold this in now. And you can see here that it's got a runny texture, and that's what a good cream cheese frosting should be. It should be slightly runny, but not melting. So now I'm going to quickly ice these cupcakes. You can use that offset spatula or even just a spoon. Anything is fine. So you want to get it onto the center and then just spread it around. Now it's entirely up to you how much or how little of this frosting you want on your cupcake. You know, a good comparison for cream cheese frosting is that it should look like snow. So guys, I'm pretty sure that whoever you make these cupcakes for this Christmas is just bound to be really impressed with them. Now, you can't really send me a gift to thank me for this recipe, but what you can do instead is to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. Merry Christmas, and see you next time. Hi everyone, welcome to my recipe book with me, Tarika, where today I'm going to be making party dips. So, you know, I'm pretty sure that you've been in situations where you've called people over and you've cooked a really awesome meal for them, but then you're just too exhausted to even think of what to serve for snacks. So, which is why I'm going to show you two really easy and flavor-packed dips that you can make, probably ahead of time even, and plenty of options on how to serve them up. So let's get started with the first one. It's a Thai-style peanut dip. So obviously for a peanut dip, the first thing you need is peanut butter. And I'm not going to judge you on what kind of peanut butter you're going to use. If you have homemade, organic peanut butter, use that. But if you are using store-bought peanut butter, you know, that's fine too. If you want to know how to make homemade peanut butter or maybe even almond butter, leave me a comment and, you know, I'll probably make that recipe for you. We're not heating anything right now. We're just getting this peanut butter in. And now I'm just going to grate some garlic. There's about 2 small cloves of garlic. And now I'm going to add some fresh lemon juice. You know, if you have a lime, that's even better. I couldn't find lime, so I'm using lemon instead. But lime will go very well with Thai style anything. So in Thai cuisine, you're always balancing flavors between sweet, salty, spicy, and sour. And now for the salty element, I'm using soy sauce. For the sweet bit, I'm using just about a teaspoon of brown sugar. Now, of course, as a substitute, you can always use white sugar. And now, if you've been watching my recipe book for a while, you will know that my favorite part is always adding the spicy element. So I'm adding a little over a quarter of a teaspoon of paprika. But if you can't handle too much heat in your food, go with lesser. That's the thing about this dip. You're just adjusting the flavors to whatever you like. So that's in. And now I'm going to get some coconut milk. So I'm going to start with an equal amount of coconut milk as the peanut butter. So that's 1/3 of a cup. But usually I increase that amount. But we'll see how it goes. Okay. So now I'm just going to get this onto a gentle simmer for it to cook slightly. And I'm putting this on very low heat just because I want the flavors to meld together. And then I'm going to let it cool. So there it goes. Okay, so we're already liking the way this smells around here. So I'm just going to quickly give it a taste. Because this is me and I can always handle things a little bit more spicy, I'm going to make it slightly more spicy. And add just about a teaspoon more of coconut milk. Okay, so that's it. I'm just going to take this off the heat. you know, if you're making this in the morning and then heading to work, you can just wrap it with some cling film and leave it in the refrigerator. I, however, if you have been watching my recipe book, will not be using cling film. Well, not unless I really have to. Or you know why. Okay, so dip number 2 is one that I'm going to make with some Greek yogurt. So now, you know, don't get alarmed. This is not something fancy that I bought at a really expensive supermarket. It's actually something that I've been making all my life, and I'm pretty sure you've been making it as well. This is actually hung curd. You let the water or the whey drain out from this yogurt for about an hour or so, or maybe a little bit longer, but not longer than that. Otherwise, you're going to end up with labne. And that, my dear, is what Greek yogurt is. So I've got about 400 grams of yogurt that I started out with. I've drained it, and what I'm left with is about 1 cup of Greek yogurt. So I'm just going to chop up this coriander finely because it's going to end up in the Greek yogurt. And when you're eating this dip, you don't want any big pieces of the leaves coming into your mouth. That seems to be done. Okay, so I'm just going to gather that up and put this in the bowl with my Greek yogurt. So I'm not going to add too much lemon juice, just about 1.5 teaspoons because I'm going to add something else later which is also going to give it a little bit of tang. You'll see what it is. I'm just grating 2 cloves of garlic. I'm just going to stir that in right now. So can you see just how thick and creamy this is? This is what Greek yogurt or hung curd or hung yogurt does to a dip. Okay, so now we just want to liven up these flavors a bit. So I'm going to add all the spices. Paprika, about 1/4 teaspoon, some salt, a tiny pinch of coriander powder, now some pepper. And so now for the secret ingredient, I just like to add a very tiny amount of some English mustard. It just, you know, adds that zing to this dip. Just stir that in. Okay. So now I'm just going to give it a taste, and this is what you must always do with these dips. I think it's fine the way it is. So I'm just going to put it in this bowl before I can garnish it. Just look at that beautiful texture that only a Greek yogurt could give you. It almost looks like ice cream, right? Like a soft serve ice cream. No, you don't think so? Maybe I just want ice cream right now. Maybe that's what I'll do once we're done shooting. So at the beginning of the video, I promised you plenty of options to serve these dips with, and that's exactly what I've got for you. So one is that you can always expect is some potato chips. So I've got that in a bowl. And now for a healthier option. I've got some sliced carrots. These are just peeled. And now for the next thing that you can serve up is some cucumbers. So I've sliced these cucumbers, and what I've done is also that I've just scooped out the seeds. Now this is a pro tip that I'm giving you. If you're doing this ahead of time, if you're making this in the morning and you need to serve it up in the evening, this is what's really important, because the seeds, if you leave the seeds in, that's what's going to make the cucumbers really watery and soppy if you leave them in a box. So you want to get the seeds out, and it'll make it much easier to serve them de-seeded. We've done a slightly naughty option, not so healthy option with the chips, and I've also given you healthy options with the carrots and the cucumbers. So we have to have something in between just to balance it out, right? So I'm going to also serve these up with some crackers. Now if you're looking at me and saying, you know, crackers are supposed to be served with cheese, and what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. So just trust me on this. I've tried these crackers with the peanut dip and the Greek yogurt dip, and it really tastes very good. I think our platter of snacks and dips is ready for our guests this evening. Are you going to have some people over?